you have to start questioning, like, why was this not brought to a vote? Who is donating to these legislators that makes them not want to pass this common sense piece of legislation?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Last week, the Alabama legislative session wrapped up, and there was a lot that didn't pass. Some of which was good and some of which was bad. Like there were some things that were good that they didn't pass and some things that it was bad that they didn't pass. I want to talk about SB 22 for a second. That's a thing that is bad that it didn't pass. SB 22, I think sponsored in the state Senate, obviously. It's a Senate bill by Marika Coleman. That would have allowed the Alabama Department of Revenue to revoke tax incentives from companies that violate child labor law. It wouldn't have even mandated it. That was the original version of the bill, but it was watered down to say that, okay, fine, Alabama Department of Revenue, you don't have to revoke tax incentives from companies that abuse children to make profits in the state of Alabama. We're not even going to say that's a requirement. It's not even a requirement. This bill was so watered down and so mild and so milquetoast that it wasn't even saying it is a requirement to get tax dollars from the citizens of Alabama. It's not even a requirement that you don't abuse children for profit, right? It's just saying that we are going to allow the Department of Revenue that authority to take it away if they think the abuse of children goes too far, right? I mean, this is a very, very milquetoast, mild sort of bill that really is kind of astonishing that it's not the law of the land already. Like, why does the Department of Revenue not have the authority to revoke tax incentives for people that abuse children for profit?
Can I just say, I had a state legislator tell me that exact thing.
Yeah.
He said, wow, that's so common sense. You would think it would be the law already.
Right. That's what you would think, but it's not. Right now, the Department of Revenue is constrained, and they don't have the authority to revoke tax incentives because corporations abuse children for profit. I think that's bad. I think it's bad that that's not the law, and I think this should be the law. And in the defense of legislators, some of them, it did make it pretty far. It passed the Senate almost unanimously. It passed the House committee, but it did not reach the floor for a vote. And so it did not pass both chambers, and so it died. But even as I say in defense of the legislators, that is almost exactly how far this bill made it last year. And so you have to start to question, especially since this is a watered down version of the original one. You know, the original one would have said, like, okay, it's mandatory. You abuse children for profit in the state of Alabama, your tax incentives are gone. But this version is so, like, you have to start questioning the priorities of the leadership in the houses and saying, why is this not just speeding through? Like, why is this not just, you know, okay, first thing on the calendar? I think this was pre-filed, right? This was filed before the legislative session even started. And so you have to start questioning why, because this is such a common sense sort of law, bill, why is it not just flying through without, you know, conversation and stuff like that? And it's not like this is, unlike some of the bills that have been proposed, this is not a bill that is addressing a non-issue. This is an issue in the state of Alabama. Remember, in Coleman, Alabama, less than, you know, like an hour drive from where I am recording right now, a 15-year-old child could not even drive, died on his first day on the job. I believe that's true, that it was his first day on the job. But he was 15 years old. 15 years old, you don't have a driver's license. Couldn't drive, fell off of a roof and died, right? we have had the U.S. Department of Labor suing employers in the state of Alabama for, quote, this is the language of the U.S. Department of Labor, oppressive child labor between July 2021 and February 2022. That case has still not resolved, come to an ultimate resolution. But dozens and dozens of people, 13, 14 years old, working in manufacturing environments, which are, manufacturing environments themselves are very, very dangerous. That's why there are, within the child labor law, there are further restrictions on children working in manufacturing environments. Children can work in other environments more easily and with fewer restrictions than they can in manufacturing environments. But this manufacturing environment in particular, the one that I'm thinking of, it had 13-year-old children working there, and this was a place that had only a year before had had $50,000 of OSHA citations for I think it was decapitation hazards and crush hazards, right? And so this isn't even just the normal manufacturing environment is scary and dangerous. This is a manufacturing environment that is so dangerous as to be illegal for adults, right? This was illegal safety standards for adults, much less children. And so this is not a problem that does not exist in the state of Alabama. And yet, our legislators could not make it a priority to get this passed. And so you have to start questioning, what's going on there? Why was this not brought up before to a vote? Who is donating to these legislators that makes them not want to pass this very, very common sense piece of legislation? What is going on there? So the legislative session ended without passing this bill on child labor, which again, just to reiterate, because it is so milquetoast, it allows the Alabama Department of Revenue to revoke tax incentives from corporations that violate our child labor laws. And we couldn't get that passed. There were some other bills that didn't pass, though, some that are probably good that they didn't pass. Adam, what are we looking at there?
Right. Well, there were several good bills in addition to SB 22 that did not pass, and I'll circle back to that. But there were some terrible bills proposed that also died at the end of the session. I know Senator Elliott had been pushing a bill to take over the Department of Archives. And a lot of folks I know in history circles and in, just in the cultural arts space were very, very concerned about that. It was going to, deeply politicize the Department of Archives. And it's really in retaliation for some exhibits that they've had over the years. So that's a good one. I'm glad that died at the end.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
There were also a rash of just anti-immigrant bills that were proposed this year. It's clear that many state legislators were, taking some signals from Washington, D.C., and so there were quite a few bills that were proposed that would target, immigrants. Theoretically, most of them were targeting undocumented immigrants, but they were written in such a way that would clearly lead to additional harassment and targeting of immigrant communities broadly. So a few of those bills that did die at the end, one was HB 304, another was HB 297, one was HB 3, which would have enhanced penalties for crimes committed by undocumented immigrants. There was a bill that would have actually not counted English language learner students in regards to sports classifications of schools, which is an interesting thing to be spending your time on in the state legislature. So yeah, there were quite a few immigration bills that were proposed this year. Unfortunately, in a lot of people's eyes, there were some that did pass, despite a lot of opposition. I know, Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice and quite a few other groups were active against some of these bills because some of them, are going to make it a lot harder just to live in Alabama communities if you even appear to be an immigrant. And that's the concern, is that racial profiling and targeting by law enforcement is going to increase. There was a bill that would have allowed local law enforcement to enter into MOUs to enforce federal immigration laws. That one did die. That was HB 7. So that would have ramped up the immigration enforcement even further and entangled local law enforcement even further into that operation. So that did die at the end. But unfortunately, there were some good bills that died at the end as well. And I don't know if you want me to go ahead and mention a couple of those, but
Yeah, go ahead.
We've talked on this show about the broken parole board here in the state of Alabama. It's so broken that they went from following their own guidelines 6% of the time to 20% of the time. And we're supposed to be pleased with that. There were quite a few bills this year proposed that would have tried to improve the parole board system here in the state. I mean, and just for context, right? Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates on planet Earth. We lock up more people than almost anywhere else on the planet. And our prison system has been found to be unconstitutional, right? It violates the rights of its inhabitants every single day that is in operation. That has not been resolved. And feeding into this crisis is a broken parole board that, again, does not even follow its own guidelines in terms of releasing people who have, quote unquote, done their time, have, demonstrated that they are ready to go back out into the free world, so to speak. So there were several bills that would have tried to improve it. One was actually by a Republican, Clyde Chambliss. Senate Bill 324 would have just been a straight up, expansion of the parole board. Hey, let's put some more people on this board to try to make it a little more effective. Unfortunately, for a lot of folks, that one did die as well at the end. But on that, there was one piece of potentially good news, which is there was a budgetary provision added that will force the parole board to actually report to the legislature if they want to receive their funding. So there was at least a minor step towards accountability of our broken parole board system. But really unfortunate to see some positive bills on criminal justice reform and voting rights that, again, to your point about SB 22, in most cases were very mild, very just modest tweaks to the system. Yeah. But were not prioritized, and it's really unfortunate because the state legislature did spend a lot of time discussing red meat issues, talking about transgender athletes and books in the library that they deemed offensive. They spent time talking about religious education, all sorts of things, so it shows a priorities in terms of what gets passed and what doesn't.
Quirky Geek Girl says, good morning. So many terrible bills happening all over. The child labor law reversals are horrid. And that is, we had one of those bills. It wasn't ultimately just a huge change to child labor laws in Alabama. But last year we did roll back some of our child labor laws, which makes it all the more egregious that we do not now have at least a mechanism to pull back tax incentives if the further weakened child labor laws are violated.
Right. And there's one last thing I want to say on that, which is last year, Alabama passed Senate Bill 231. And this is a bill written by ALEC, the billionaire-backed special interest group that writes a lot of this kind of legislation, shops it around from state to state. It came from Tennessee, and then it went to Georgia, and then it came here to Alabama. And what this does is it takes away tax incentives from companies that voluntarily recognize a union, right? So if the workers organize and they show up to the boss and say, hey, look, we've got a majority of folks have signed cards. We're a union now. The company has the right under federal law to voluntarily recognize it and begin bargaining and move forward with the process, right? There is no need necessarily for a secret ballot election with the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. However, the state of Alabama has made it very, very clear that it expects employers to not reasonably deal with their workers when they organize, right? So they will take tax incentives away from a company if it voluntarily recognizes a union, but absent passing this bill's SB 22, they could violate child labor laws. So the state of Alabama believes that corporate behavior towards their workers organizing is more important than corporate behavior towards children, right? They are placing a priority on companies attacking unions, and they think that's more important than companies exploiting children.
Yeah, it's insane. The Uncle Rico says, good morning. Steve says the U.S. isn't good at enforcing anything when it comes to workers. Indeed. True American says, imagine being mad at Trump for wanting a better working environment to bring back companies with slave labor and who knows what laws. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Feel free to call in and clarify. That wasn't super... I did not receive that as very coherent. We do have a caller on the line, though. The caller is from a 256 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 256 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Press Secretary Dwayne.
Hey, Dwayne.
Hello,
good to hear from
Jacob.
you. What's
Hello,
on your mind?
Adam.
Yeah.
Great to hear from y'all. I wanted to tell you, I've been involved in all the things that you're talking about right there, like intimately at the Department of Corrections, at sites protesting, and I wanted to tell you, if you don't mind, I've got Quora blog that will give you all kinds of information and videos of, if I could tell those to you for the listeners to look at.
Dwayne,
okay
you were
with
kind
y'all?
of breaking up there. You're kind of breaking up. Can you
No.
repeat that?
I'm trying to. Yes, I'm on Quora, where I actually give out a great detail of information about the prison system, what's going on, the child labor laws, all that stuff. If I could give them for people to go look at.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, send that to us.
Okay. I've got. Can I tell you right now?
Yeah,
Or
go
do
ahead.
we- Okay. History of Horrors, the Alabama Department of Corrections on Quora. Okay. Alabama corruption. And again, guys, if you just put www.alabamacorruption all together in one word .quora.com, it takes you right to it that way too. Both of those are take you into the whole history of everything that happened from 2013 all the way to us still not doing anything about the federal judge's order to take care of the prison situation. Did you know that the Hyundai plant had like a 13-year-old girl working there, and the Enterprise, Alabama Police Department told our Attorney General, and he did nothing.
Yep.
In advance that it was there, and he is running potentially and stating that he more than likely will for U.S. Senate, and he is not a good person when it comes to child labor. Things that are happening there, y'all.
Yep.
So
Appreciate it,
if
Dwayne.
anybody wants to, thanks a whole lot, y'all. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate the information about Steve Marshall. I was not aware he was considering a U.S. Senate run, but it is my understanding that he has not taken any sort of action on any of these cases that we've discussed on the show over the years. He has taken action against rules that would protect farm workers when organizing, as well as rules which would have granted a pay raise to quite a few workers under a Biden-era rule regarding overtime and salary. If you remember what I'm talking about there, basically increasing the threshold.
Yeah, he also signed on to a lawsuit against the $15 an hour minimum wage for federal contractors. Yeah, just really, really bad stuff.
So yeah, I mean, again, shows priorities.
Yeah.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.